Hey guys, CD Projekt Red has been the center of attentions over the weekend and not for good reason. It all started with Endymion. He made a tweet saying that in his new video he goes over new details given to him by a source at Ubisoft, and this source revealed that things aren't looking too hot on CD Projekt Red. This prompted the CEO of CD Projekt to come out and say this right here. It seems like we live in times where anyone can record complete nonsense and make a story out of it. CDPR talent leaving, we have the lowest rotation of people in recent years. DEI-driven recruitment, we hire based on merit and talent alone, just as we make games driven by artistic vision alone. Why did we choose the Unreal Engine? Because it enables us to work on our games more efficiently, and we remain cutting-edge tech-wise. The Witcher 3's director left? Well, yeah, more than 2 years ago now. Now can we stop looking for conspiracy theories and go back to making cool stuff? So, it sounds like he's covering his ass, to be honest, and I'm going to try to explain as we go along through several instances of suspicious language and behaviors from their company. By the end, you'll be able to make up your own mind, but make no mistake, I'm not going to be mincing words. This company was super special to me, and it bothers me a lot to be seeing them going down the same road of failure that so many others are following in. The CEO brushes off this idea that the company is caked in DEI policies and doesn't have DEI-driven recruitment, saying it's based on merit and talent alone, which is immediately debunked by the fact that they have a program where they only allow aspiring female developers to take advantage of a free ride through learning game development, which also includes getting hardware for free. More on this a little later. They also got a cakeload of DEI nonsense on their website. What you'll see here is a lot of manipulative nonsense language that places diversity and inclusion as this super special element that is going to enrich every aspect of game development and lead all of us to the best games ever made. I gotta say guys, I hate this language, like it's just so manipulative. So desperate. They put it in so many different places, and it's like they attribute this insanely high value to it as if it was some sort of super ingredient to the formula of making great video games, when in reality it just isn't. We haven't seen a single bit of evidence of this, we've only seen evidence of the contrary, where a game goes full DEI and flops on its ass. We've seen people get lost in the sauce chasing after this DEI ideology, which is so incredibly regressive in its own DNA, because DEI is like a lens for the world. A normal person judges another person based off of the contents of their character. A person seeing the world through a DEI lens judges them based on their value, and they attribute this value based on how much worth there is in their race, their gender, their sexuality, their religion, their background, their history, and even their physical state too, which is why we're seeing some disabled characters now, because we gotta pander to them as well. This is why everyone is shitting on white people nowadays. Through the DEI lens, white people are in last place. Hell, through the DEI lens, some people even consider white people as the source of all of their problems in the world. This is racist as fuck, and this is what DEI is all about. It's an utterly regressive concept with no value. Even if tomorrow all the white people in the world got on a spaceship and left to go live in a space colony, all of these DEI freaks would just find another group to blame all their problems on and call privileged. There is no end goal with DEI. There is no point where these initiatives just close down and go, okay guys, we did it, we achieved our diversity goals, time to shut down the division. No sir, they're in it for the long haul. At the end of the road of DEI, there is only more DEI as people pit themselves against one another in oppression Olympics to find out which of them are the least privileged that should be catered to and which of them are the most privileged that should shut the fuck up. So yeah, I'm sorry guys, but anytime a company is going down the DEI road, it's always concerning in and of itself. If you are a boss and you're committed to DEI, and then you have a person in front of you looking for a job, their resume barely matters unless they have some gender and race studies type of nonsense in there. You'll be actually more interested in if their race, gender, sexuality, religion, background, etc. is of worth to your company's diversity quota rather than if they are the right person for the position. Let's look at more examples of this language trying to paint DEI as a super secret formula to success. Some of the stuff in here isn't even that bad, trust me, I have seen far worse. But it's still bad nonetheless. So again, look at the language here. The potential that can be unlocked through diversity strengthens our games, communities and teams.
Once again, respectfully, I say to myself, what the fuck does that mean?
Like, what the fuck kind of Magic the Gathering bullshit language is this? I can understand the last one a little bit. Openness to everyone's backgrounds creates more meaningful collaborations and ideas, so basically what this can mean is that naturally, having people in creative places with diverse backgrounds can make for different ideas based off of different perspectives that they might need. But they act like this is some sort of super secret tool for game development that never existed, and this was never really a question before. So for example, take Ubisoft. When they were making Assassin's Creed games in all of those different settings, they hired consultants to tell them important shit to do with the history and the culture and the language from those places. And this is really the only time where this is actually as important and meaningful as they portray it here. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're making a game, you don't need a diversity team of several different backgrounds to come and give you irrelevant insights of their personal views or whatever. If you're making Witcher, for example, stick to the books and the culture depicted in it. If you're making Cyberpunk, do the same thing. Oh shit, what is this? We want to put in the Voodoo Boys faction and we don't know anything about Haitian people? Easy. You hire a consultant who does and who's going to be able to give you that perspective. Next up is some of that classic bullshit. Our diversity fuels us to create an inclusive environment where authentic leaders have the skills to listen to every person, overcoming unconscious biases in decision-making processes. So this is something that you guys don't know about me, but a long time ago, back in around 1537, give or take, I studied bullshit at the Royal University of Coimbra, and so I learned how to translate bullshit sentences like this. And what that means is that their diversity fuels them to create an environment of Karens who have the skills to listen to other Karens who think that some things are too harmful to be put into video games, or that some things that some co-worker said is inappropriate because it involves unconscious biases and microaggressions.
A team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team for indie games. But who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me. I am saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something may be okay, but it was really a microaggression. No one wants to deal with that while they're trying to make a game that they love.
And then below that, where it says, inclusion fosters the growth and resilience of our teams who feel empowered by leaders who take risks and boldly present different points of view, what it means is that inclusion fosters a work environment of self-absorbed narcissists who think they have some sort of internal war to be won against their audiences, and whose definitions of boldly presenting different points of view is basically taking a character design and going, how about if we do not sexualize our female character? How about if we make her look dull and uninteresting instead, in order to better reflect the real world around us and not dive into harmful body and beauty standards for female identifying persons? And then everyone in the office claps because of how brave that was, except for one guy, whose name is like Gary or something, and Gary goes, "What? Are you saying that we should make unappealing character designs? That doesn't sell well. Also, by that logic, are you saying that on average, real women are ugly?" And then a cold dead silence overtakes the room, as everyone looks at Gary as if he just stepped on a landmine. And then Gary is called to HR and is never seen from again. Now I know some of you listening to this might actually be like, what the fuck are you talking about, exaggerate much? But take a look at this list of questions to consider that Microsoft sent to all of its studios within the Xbox Game Studios umbrella as guidelines for the making of future games just a few months ago. Just look at all this shit. It's inhumane. It's completely antithetical to art. All of these restrictions, all of these obstacles to tiptoe around, to not trigger any potential problematic issues that live only in the heads of morons who go out of their way to get offended at something and sound the horns of the cancel culture. All of these special considerations to make sure that you're proudly and respectfully representing various cultures within your game regardless of your setting. Look at all their bullshit about female characters, look at their diversity quotas on top of more diversity quotas. They even have quotas for screen time for characters of different gender and racial identities to be balanced out. This is nuts. And again, this did not leak. This is something that they are so delusionally invested in that they showed it off themselves, proudly, back before Stellar Blade's launch because of the discourse online about how attractive the character was designed to be and how supposedly bad and wrong that is. This is how the mentality within these studios devolves into when you hire activists and put them in positions of power. And if you're still not convinced of how bad this stuff is, then just bear with me here a little bit more until a later point in the video where we talk a bit about Ubisoft and Concord's failures and how they relate to all of this stuff. And then the last one here is just funny because it says that their processes ensure fair treatment, equal development opportunities and fair pay, and then they have a program that is completely shut down to men and only wants to help and recruit women to become developers. It's all masked under this fruity fantasy language, but once again, take a look behind the curtain and all you see is a bunch of contradictions, virtue signaling, and worse, restrictions to what is okay and to what isn't, based on people who have no business being the judge, juries, and executioners of these metrics. The rest is just more of the same manipulative language here trying to beat it into our heads that DEI is amazing despite all evidence of the contrary. I just want to show this last thing here. This is their last point on the DEI page, saying that they signed a document committing to non-discrimination in the workplace, which, again, the program thing. This just goes to show you this DEI lens that we mentioned just a bit ago, openly in action. Men and white people can go fuck themselves. Discrimination against them is just relabeled as diversity, and in CD Projekt Red's case here, diversity means the exclusion of men from their programs and recruitment process, and this is still not classified as discrimination in the workplace. Never trust DEI in your lives, people. It is a fucking virus. It has the mentality of a cult where disagreeing with it is not acceptable, and there is no tolerance for different views on the same matters. I would rather be in a cage with lions than in a cage with people who live and breathe DEI, because even though I'm not white, I don't play into their narrative, and that's all that matters to them at the end of the day. Conform to the regime or you deserve no quarter. It's inherently regressive and it laughs in your face. It tells you to be considerate, inclusive and tolerant, etc. while openly being discriminatory and forcing everyone around you to shame you and ostracize you for noticing its hypocrisy and speaking against it. It creates rules for others to abide by while creating loopholes and excuses for themselves to break. I am not boycotting anyone here, and I am also not carving it into stone that CD Projekt will only produce slop going forward. However, I am telling you that hands down, DEI is never good news. It appeals to the worst that society has to offer. Parasites who never earned their places and fight dirty as hell to keep them and reach even higher places. I don't usually go this harshly in my videos, but the true nature of DEI merits no mercy. It is a return to regressive, tribalistic, discriminatory bullshit that we should already know how dangerous it is. If we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. Now buckle in because we're going to look at a video CD Projekt Red put up a couple of years ago on their commitment to ESG. I think it's important to go over it again with this new perspective on CD Projekt Red's priorities to DEI. And we're going to take special note of their language and the message they're trying to convey. It's going to be a bit lengthy, sorry in advance, but I'm going to try to keep it clear and give examples.
I would like to present our strategic approach to ESG issues in the context of our business. This approach reflects our identity and our values. It also takes into consideration the interests of our stakeholders identified in a relevance survey which we carried out for the first time in 2021. The survey produced a list of ESG topics regarded as important for CD Projekt.
Okay, so they made a survey and it produced a list of ESG topics regarded as important to deploy. By who? The stakeholders? Are they making games for the stakeholders or are they making games for the paying customer? The truth is that if you guys at home watching this right now, or in the toilet, whatever, if you guys had a gaming company called, I don't know, Steel Mill Gaming or some shit, and you did a survey asking your shareholders if they would like you to move down a live service road and make as much money as Rockstar did with GTA Online, or Epic Games with Fortnite, or Blizzard with Overwatch, with all of those loot boxes and passes and microtransactions, etc., or make single player games that you will be able to sell once, barring any future expansions, they would all tell you to go down the live service road as well. But that doesn't mean that it would be a good decision. I just want to place this here because it's important to cut through the bullshit. The shareholders always want more money, and if they had to listen to them and pull up surveys, then they would have taken this company down a different, more profitable and easier route years ago. Doesn't mean that it would work. Obviously a lot of them failed. We can count so many live services that failed trying to chase the popularity of Call of Duty, Overwatch, fucking Fortnite, etc. But they still tried it because their shareholders wanted more money, their investors wanted more money, and their executives wanted more money, and were stupid enough to chase that train. So this here is just something else entirely. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the very important language manipulation that they pulled when talking about their games and what made them successful.
We believe that our primary means of influencing the world at large is by developing games which can enrich gamers' perceptions. This is why we do not shy away from confronting socially important topics in the stories we tell. Our games depict social inequalities, the various paths people take through life, and the problems they face. We want to make sure that the characters populating the worlds we create represent a diverse set of mindsets, social groups, and backgrounds. In The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, we tackled the issue of domestic violence, strained family relationships, and discrimination. Cyberpunk 2077, on the other hand, addresses alienation and dehumanization of society. Our products reach millions of people around the world, so we want to focus on what's important and encourage gamers to reflect upon the choices that surround them.
So my view of this is that they are framing this disingenuously to pass something as something else. What they did here was present a believable world, rich in detail and world building. A gritty world that mixes dark fantasy with the dark realities of humanity. So of course, they included this domestic violence thing with the Baron and his wife. But they didn't make it about the domestic violence itself. They didn't drag the player out, shove their faces onto the screen and shout at them, "Look at the women's suffrage. Look at it. This is what women go through every day. Down with the patriarchy." They just presented a questline that included these concepts, and they did them justice because they were far more interested in delivering a good story with well-written characters and interesting situations than to virtue signal to their audiences for ESG points, which is what ESG, DEI, and intersectionality-driven content does. We'll have another example of this in a little bit. Through just presenting the situation as it was, they managed to make the players both feel like the Baron was a piece of shit for what he did, but also have a grain of empathy for a broken man, drunk with sadness and regret for what he did, and desperate to find the best treatment for his wife. Which makes for far more compelling storytelling than a virtue signal approach of just reducing the Baron, for example, to a cheap stereotypical wife-beating trash man with no redeeming qualities and no worth whatsoever as a man. This is the sort of weak, bad man stereotypes that we see in some pieces of media such as Captain Marvel. The type of unhinged activists who are fostered in DEI consulting companies and in those groups that point out supposedly brave ideas or problematic elements and whatnot would say that giving the Baron the redemption arc is the same as glorifying a wife-beater, and so it isn't appropriate. Meanwhile, all it did was it told a far more complex and compelling story and left it to the players to make up their minds on what to think and how to react, instead of telling them what to feel through forceful, unrealistic storytelling. And that is part of the reason why Witcher 3 worked and the Netflix Witcher series sucks. Because similarly, all of this nonsense about characters representing different cultures and whatnot was also not a point of theirs in Witcher. In Cyberpunk, oh absolutely, there's loads of diversity of NPCs and cultures. We got, for example, the Valentinos, right, so mostly Hispanic, traditional, very religious. Then we have the Mox, mostly composed of women who overthrew their pimps, basically. They're very focused on protecting their own. Then there's the Tiger Claws, mostly Asian people and obviously very influenced by Japanese Japanese culture and religion, the voodoo boys, mostly black people, lots of Haitian culture and language, and very tied to technology and to things that one would even consider beyond human, like for example constantly uploading themselves into the net. But in The Witcher, it's a bunch of white people, as it should be because it takes place in the Northern Realms, where the inspiration was obviously the author's own country of Poland. The only people of color that you can find are people who traveled from different places, from across different borders. So for example, there are runewrights in Witcher 3 from Ophir who look like this. Again, the language here is what should be of concern, because none of this was ever relevant. They made the games that didn't talk about any of this in the past. None of it was important. What was important was that the game turned out as best as possible, to follow the books and to exercise some creative freedom in the places where they felt like they wanted to. Like for example, making Triss total waifu material rather than a backstabber, or something like that. Don't kill me guys, I haven't read the books yet. Anyway, speaking of language, their language was straight up pro-consumer, as in pro-gamer. They weren't addressing their fucking corporate masters with, "Oh, we want to reflect ESG for our stakeholders because it's important." Their language was, "We got this fucking awesome game, we're very excited to show it, we did this, we did that, you'll be able to do this, you'll be able to do that, etc. It's gonna be $60, no more, no less, no microtransactions, no BS." The corporatization of the games industry is so fucking cringe. It takes itself so seriously, like it wants to impact society and whatever the fuck else. Just make games and vibe with your communities, Jesus. The shift of the language, the shift of the narrative and the attitude of what the language is trying to portray in this message and the intended target of the message are what is extremely important here, because it's language that is trying to not only paint a negative, cringe-focused future, but also trying to pervert the past, so that in the future, when their games are potentially filled with overt DEI injections that break the lore or the immersion or weaken the stories that they have to tell, they can just say that they've always done it. It's always been there.
But what do you mean there's a problem with female Witchers for diversity and inclusion? We always supported female-centric issues and featured strong female characters. Just look at our story about domestic violence. What do you mean there's a problem with diverse NPC populations in the new Witcher game, or even the remake? We have always done gender, sexuality, racial, ethnic, economic, and even neurodiverse diversity in our video games. Just look at Cyberpunk, guys. What do you mean we have entire quests focused on virtue signaling and diversity on very important societal matters, guys? We had loads of important societal matters all across our video games. We are merely adapting our stories to modern audiences that reflect the world around us. If you have a problem with that now, you're just being a bigot. We haven't changed at all, guys, trust us. Even though I look like a prisoner of war making this video, just shut up and consume product. It's still your good old CD Projekt Red.
This is often some of the shit that I see in comments, whether it be in my videos or just in social media in general whenever discussing these situations. I see people going, but like, what about this other game and what about that other game? They've always had these things and it was never a problem, or hey dipshit, politics have always been part of games, etc, etc, etc. These people don't realize that when they say these things, they're only further proving our point, that this stuff has indeed been present in video games, but there was a clear difference between it being done right, completely encapsulated within the game's own world building, story or characters, and presented accurately, versus what is happening right now where this stuff is shoehorned, despite the world building, the story or the characters, for diversity quotas and propaganda, ending up as immersion-breaking injections of things that clearly do not belong within those worlds or settings, or even situations. People who use these excuses really think that they're doing something, but in reality they're just proving our points, that these things have always existed, there is no bigotry, otherwise there would have been bigotry before. It's just that right now it is being done completely differently. It is being done with different intentions, and it is being done disproportionately. Let's get into an example. In Cyberpunk 2077, there is a trans character named Claire. First of all, she was written so well that you could play the entire game and not even know about it. One of the issues with this virtue signaling DEI-driven content is that this is a big no-no. If you have a trans character, they have to be advertised as trans, they have to be presented overtly as trans, so that the fucking ESG overlords can see them just as well as we do. Claire reveals to be trans in a passing dialogue where she mentions that her deceased husband was the only person that she was able to rely on during her transition. If you're not paying attention, you can even end up thinking that she's talking about changing the oil on her car or some shit. She never brings it up again, and it is not at all what makes up her character's personality or her job or her objectives. The only thing that she has that points to it is a little trans flag sticker on the back of her truck, which you could argue is a bit tacky because this would assume that in 2077 transsexuality hasn't yet been normalized to the point where trans people still need a flag for representation in a world where you literally install a fucking grenade into your face or replace 90% of your body with machinery and weapons. So I totally get the tackiness of the flag, but to me it's not a big deal. It's one of those things where I'm perfectly fine with compromising on. Because besides this, she is also very humanized as a character with flaws. In her personal questline, there is a morality question in her quest for revenge, where in the end, she ends up being wrong and you benefit far more if you talk sense into her rather than helping her fulfill her request. And this, I call a great example of an inclusion of a trans character because she's not being pandered to, she's not being made flawless, and real trans people don't want to shove the fact that they used to be a dude or a chick down your gullet. That's not in their list of priorities. Now let's look at an example where they did it the wrong way, besides Dragon Age Veilguard of course. If you wanna know how fake as fuck their supposed inclusion excuse is for the top surgery scars in their character creator, then check out my video on the matter. I'll put it in the top comment and add a little note on the screen here. So besides Veilguard, Horizon Forbidden West features a trans character. They shoved the character off to a side quest up in a snow area. Here's a video of the scene.
To undergo our clan's most difficult trial on his own.
And you think he's crazy for trying?
I'm not a fan of that word. When I chose to wear a woman's armor, people called me crazy too.
You serious?
So they got this trans person just outing themselves as trans like, hey yo, I didn't like that word, they called me crazy when I started wearing female armor. And Aloy just kinda stands there awkwardly because of course that was a totally natural interaction. This trans character is so incredibly out of place and so immersion breaking, it cannot even be compared to the Claire situation. Do you see the stark difference? This is like if the first time you walked into the Afterlife bar, where Claire is a bartender at, and you ordered a drink, so let's say that you ordered a Johnny Silverhand, and she went, oh yeah, back when I was a dude, I totally loved that drink as well. Like, what the fuck are you doing? And the setting isn't any better either. This is a dangerous tribal world. People have to hunt animals for food and dangerous machines for scrap, and even other cultural reasons, like for example trials. The last thing on these people's minds would be their gender identities. Also, they use the female body for the character, which implies that this person actually transitioned, which is impossible for them to do so in this setting. There is no medical knowledge and there are no resources. So there's always a clear way to depict certain realistic diversity in settings where they belong and in ways that make sense, and a way to totally screw it up by breaking your own lore, your own world building, your own storytelling, etc. In my opinion, which I hope to be proved wrong in the future, I guess that what we're going to start seeing when the time comes is CD Projekt Red doing the latter rather than the former. Because if you only do the former, where you actually have integrity for the worlds that you're creating and the stories that you're telling, and you want to keep lore and world building as high as quality as possible, then you have to conform with the cold hard fact that you cannot diversify a Witcher game's random population, for example, without making it look like bullshit DEI injections. You can have big city centers like for example the great city of Novigrad, where we indeed saw diversity of humans, elves and dwarves living together, right? So you can have that with merchants from different locations. Hell, there can even be some monsters living in there in disguise, as there was in Novigrad in Witcher 3. But you can't just walk into Crow's Perch, for example, and the village around it, and see diversity at the level of fucking San Francisco. Their job should be to simply stick to the source material and deliver the best product possible. Not every goddamn thing needs diversity. I don't need to feel fucking seen in Lord of the Rings or Witcher or whatever to enjoy it. The majority of people in the world does not give a single fuck about this narcissistic concept of needing to be represented in order to buy a product. Ah, but Des, it's fantasy. There's dragons and elves. Why are you okay with those, but you're not okay with black people, for example? The it's fantasy excuse is stupid and doesn't stand up to any scrutiny at all. Of course I'm okay with magic, dragons, and elves in a fantasy setting where the magic, the dragons, and the elves were woven into it properly. However, their presence does not eradicate the concept of suspension of disbelief. You can't excuse anything as, oh, it's fantasy, or oh, it's fiction, who cares? Otherwise, what's the point? There's always got to be a balance between fantasy or sci-fi elements and believability. A foundation of realism and rules that make sense, if you will, and making a setting inspired in medieval Europe look like fucking modern day California for the toxic purposes of diversity and inclusion immediately breaks that sense of immersion, especially when certain characters have certain descriptions or depictions that are being totally reversed or ignored. Let me give a positive example of Horizon this time around. The reason why I don't bat an eye to the level of diversity in what is supposed to be post-apocalyptic America is because it's explained in the lore that the machines that would repopulate the world had seeds of various ethnicities, so when they started pumping out humans from those seeds, it makes sense that they do it equally. And without the Apollo program, these people would not even know that they were of different ethnicities, different cultural groups, different countries, etc. back before the world went to shit. But anyway, let's get back to our prisoner of war from CD Projekt Red. The part about the company and the environment don't have much of note, at least not for me. If someone with better insight is able to pick up on issues and mention them, I am always up for learning. There's just two things that I've got to say. One is that I don't understand why game development studios have to do all of this bullshit. Like, just make games. All they should be thinking about is making games. These studios go so hard on all of this nonsense, and at the same time, they complain that game development is getting expensive. Well, shit, have you thought about cutting out all of this bullshit and just making games instead of turning your company into a fucking holiday resort? And the other thing is the stuff that I meant to mention before about Concord and Ubisoft. When you're diversifying your work environment and doing initiatives and loads of special spaces that turn an office into a more of a carnival fair, things can go really crazy really fast. There is definitely value in treating your employees well, but things can get really weird after a certain point where you're just infantilizing them and creating a culture of toxic positivity within the studio where, just as it happened with Ubisoft and just as it happened with Concord, constructive criticism does not exist. Everyone just has to be super positive about everything. If an employee sees things that they don't think look good or play well or are going to annoy people or get backlash or are simply not fun and need readjusting or rethinking, they need to shut up about it and just pretend like everything is fine, because negativity is toxic, and Sharon and Kyle from HR are going to call you in for a meeting about you creating a hostile workplace. Over at Ubisoft, they would even summon you to HR for using exclamation points on your messages and emails, or for not including emojis because it was seen as aggression. Toxic positivity is a big reason behind why Concord turned out to be as terrible as it did, and a big part of how Ubisoft's games have degraded so much over time in terms of mechanics, open world design, innovation, and even writing and directing, because of these environments fostering people who get accustomed to mediocrity and treat things like criticism as hostility. They would rather ride the train full steam ahead off of a fucking cliff and then blame the toxic gamers for being haters or for having exceptionally high standards. There's also something else to be said about bureaucratic red tape. Ubisoft is yet again an example of this sort of stuff. So many initiatives and campaigns and programs and bureaus and groups and subgroups and clubs and shit. Look at this. Ubisoft doesn't even just have DEI. They have like fucking FEV mutated DEI at this point. They got DEI for their DEI. This stuff, when it gets out of hand, will absolutely eat at your company from the inside. It can become a nest of activists, just waiting for the chances to exert control over the facets of the company, such as the actual games themselves or the hiring of the staff that makes those games. Which is something that these people are already seemingly getting into, to be honest, because this initiative of singling out women for programs to get them into video game development is textbook DEI. I don't know if this is actually true or just a rumor, but Ubisoft supposedly crosses illegal lines in their program that does the same. It would not surprise me if it did, but remember, the DEI lens we mentioned, it is only bad if it's being done against women or people of color. If it's being done against men or white people, then it doesn't matter. Look, I don't want to make this whole big thing here and stand on top of a hill like Braveheart and shout from the depths of my soul that this is an oppressive attack on men, but I still think that this is bullshit. If I was a Polish dude, I would actually be pumped for a program like this. I always wanted to get into game development, but my country doesn't invest in it at all. So if I was Polish and I had this kick-ass studio growing their business in my country and hiring people and creating programs for young, interested people wanting to get into game development, and then I checked it out and it said, no, fuck you, you can't get into the program because you're a man, then you bet your sweet ass that I would be pissed off. Because to the individual person, it's not their fault that our ideological lords have decided to victimize the shit out of women and offer them programs based off of wanting to diversify workplaces in the name of equity, aka equality of outcome, which is a terrible idea. It does it and shields itself from criticism and even possible legal scrutiny under the guise of, oh, but women were oppressed for centuries. What the fuck does your average Polish guy named Busi have to do with that shit? I'm telling you, man, I'd be pissed because it's not my fault. I didn't oppress women. I have as much right as anyone else to get into a program that offers a free ride through game development school in a dream company. But you can just do it on your own. As a man, you have less barriers standing in your way than a woman. Bullshit, especially in current day. If as a man I have less barriers than a woman, then what the fuck is this program if not a barrier? I'm poor too. I don't have the means to do this on my own. What exactly does my male privilege get me besides the possible ability to walk to the studio, get told to fuck off, and then walk back home without getting catcalled by construction workers? They should have opened this program to everyone, and if it just so happened that more men showed up than women, then what's the problem? Video games like The Witcher and Cyberpunk naturally appeal more to men. It's time to stop bullshitting ourselves with this equality of outcome nonsense and let people be naturally attracted to the things that they like without trying to force diversity into them. This is the same thing that Sony is trying to force in its own company, especially in Japan. Anyway, finally they also hired Mary Kenny as a senior writer. Her previous work does not inspire much hope at all. She did work for Sweet Baby Inc. and is one of their defenders. In my mind, Sweet Baby Inc. is and always be irredeemable. They've proven time and time again that they hate the gaming space, they hate us, and they desire only to take it over and burn it to the ground in the name of their ideology. If someone defends them, then, in my mind, they defend their values. There's no two ways about it. Mary even defends the quality of their work. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? The quality of their work? Decisions like these of putting an ex-Sweet Baby Inc. employee as senior writer only make me ask more questions about CD Projekt Red's commitment to quality and integrity, especially when coupled together with the rest of the stuff on the website and the language in their video. Lastly, why not talk about this before? Well, because situations evolve, new information comes to light, new developments happen, and these things matter because they follow certain narratives and patterns. For now, much like the situation with Ghost of Yotai and the situation with Halo Studios, all we can do is be informed and stay cautious. I am obviously going to remain hopeful for the best, but yeah man, it's sad. It's just sad to see this studio going down a certain recognizable direction that often ends in flops, be it in the games industry, or the movie industry, or the TV show industry. These things have sadly turned into a battleground for the culture war. With that said, thank you very much for watching, and for all the recent support, all the recent likes, all the comments and subscriptions. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day ahead, and I'll see you guys on the next one.